Hey Anthony, congratulations. You won the 11 Second Club for this month. Great job. I love what you did. I think it's a really cool test. My name is Sean Sexton. I'm an animation mentor. I've been at AM for about 2 years now. I'm also an animator at DreamWorks. I got my start actually on a show called Futurama. I was a traditional character layout artist there for the entire run of the show. When that was finished, I went over to DreamWorks. I worked on Sinbad, Shark Tale, Flushed Away, Over the Hedge, Jerry Seinfeld's B-Movie, and now I'm currently working on Monsters vs. Aliens, which is really cool. It's a throwback to the 50s kind of monster movies, and it's going to be our first stereoscopic 3D film. So I think it's going to be a real cool one. Let's take a look at the test. I think you did an amazing job, and this was a really tough one, especially because you had to do it in a different language. I don't know if you speak Spanish, but it almost looks like you do. You did a really cool job with it. We actually have a lot of foreign animators at DreamWorks, and I'm always impressed with their handle of animating scenes in English when that's not their first language, and they get all that subtext and all that kind of good stuff in there, and it looks like you did a good job with that as well. So what I'd like to do is basically, we'll start with like kind of the broad kind of notes, and then we'll just get down into all the real picky detail stuff. So first of all, I think you did an incredible job with just really getting the accents right. You know, you really listened to the soundtrack, and you got the inflections, and you really hit where things need to hit. And I think that was the most important thing with this test, especially when you're not maybe sure of really subtle kind of nuances in the language. You know, you just really heard the sounds, and then like just the way he does this grab, and then just when that hits feels great. Actually, let's take a look at the entire piece first.
Cada cosa que se dijo y se mostró en la sala de ese tribunal, todas demuestran que es culpable, que se cree que soy idiota.
Great, really cool. Okay, so the first thing that stuck out to me when I watched it was this bigger character. I think also another thing that you did really well was you took kind of a more pushed style, more cartoony than maybe what usually people do with these characters. And I don't think you went too far with it, actually. I think you hit it just right. Because the character design and the animation style have to go hand in hand. You know, if you have like a very realistic character and they're moving too kind of zippy-poppy, it doesn't fit with the style. But these characters are a bit cartoony, and I think you just went cartoony enough without going too broad, and you didn't go too realistic. So I think you have a really nice touch with the amount that you went as far as the style goes. But with this character, I think there's a couple of areas where I know you're going for like kind of more cartoony, where things kind of zip into a pose and then stop, but he feels a little stiff at times. He feels like he kind of freezes into a pose. So we're going to work on that, just kind of loosening him up and just seeing if we can make this feel a little bit better this test. The biggest thing I think that stuck out, though, were his shoulders. It feels, especially throughout this beginning section in here and then there, it feels like his right shoulder is kind of boiling. Boiling is kind of a term that we used in 2D where when you're in-betweening, and if the lines and everything weren't perfectly spaced out and you had like little kind of wobbles, when you watch it at 24 frames per second, it kind of looks like boiling water. It just kind of boils. And that's kind of what's happening with his shoulder. It feels like they're boiling a bit. I think one of the reasons is because you're probably hunching his shoulder forward a little too much in here. So, like here, like this is a great pose. You know, like his shoulders are kind of down. You're getting this nice kind of broad shoulder look. He looks like he's really kind of a strong guy. And then when this other guy comes behind him, it feels like he should just kind of pop up his shoulders, should just kind of shrug more than hunch forward. They can do a little bit of that hunch so that it's not just one axis, but right now it feels like it's hunching forward quite a bit, and it's making kind of a pop in there. See that? And then same thing here. It feels like it's a little disconnected when it drops down. If we watch the spacing on here, it just kind of pops down, and it's not really affecting a lot of this kind of area. You know, your shoulders are just, especially his shoulders, are so big because of his design. When they move, it really does need to affect everything around it. And if just that piece moves and the head doesn't move, the neck doesn't move, the chest doesn't have any movement, it feels disconnected. So we want to just make sure that that feels right. So you could, it looks like you're doing a little bit of head movement, which is nice, but I think just the spacing on it is just a little too big, and that it doesn't have enough of a cushion at the bottom of that. And you might even be going too far down. I think that shape feels pretty good, but then going to that just feels like it just buckles a little too much. So I think you could probably stick within a shape like this and then just slow into it a little bit better.
Cada cosa que...
Same thing with his head. His head feels like it kind of turns and then just needs a little bit more of a slowing. It just kind of hits and then sticks there a little bit.
Cada cosa...
And everything kind of stops together. So it would be nice if you just kept the head just, kind of slowing in just a little bit longer, just to kind of give that a nicer feel.
Cada cosa que se dijo y se mostró.
Also, I would probably, when he's moving this shoulder, I would probably get a little bit of movement with that shoulder too. Because your shoulders they kind of work together a little bit. Especially when you have really big movements with it. Like your other shoulder just kind of reacts to the muscle connection there.
Cada cosa que se dijo y se mostró en las...
Okay, and then here I'm seeing a lot of boiling with this shoulder set up there. So I think it's just kind of simplifying it. If you could just kind of keep a pose more like this one, where you have a nice shape with the arm, and the elbow feels like it's kind of sitting and resting on the ground, on the table, like that. I think that's going to work better. But right now, it gets to this kind of a point, it rotates, but then the arm kind of comes up, and then the shoulder pops up, and then it's kind of rolling around too much. So you really are drawn to it. And at this point, we should probably be looking here, but it almost feels like this is the most movement that's happening at that section. See that? So we just want to tone that down and just stick within a pose closer to what you have on frame 5. Or actually, I don't think it's frame 5. This thing says frame 5. Whichever frame that would be. I love all this stuff in the beginning. I like the stuff with the tongue, the way he's working his bracelet there, his handcuff bracelet. I think it's really cool, and you have some nice timing on there. Oh, just one general note. Again, most people aren't going to know what this line is, unless you speak Spanish. But overall, I would say that the story doesn't totally make 100% sense, just because the line is everything that was said and shown in the courtroom, all of them prove that he's guilty. What do you think, that I'm an idiot? So if the line were prove that you're guilty, and this character's talking to him, I think it would make perfect sense. But because he's not really talking about this guy, it's kind of weird, that he's the convict. Maybe you're trying to convey that he was in the courtroom. So the story doesn't make 100% sense, but it's a cartoon. So I think what you have is still cool. I think it's a great little test. Okay, so this is all looking really nice. All the head movement, the tongue, the hand, the little finger stuff. I might do a little bit more of a cushion again with the shoulders. They're such big shapes, and when they come down in here, especially the arm and everything just kind of locks in place. I would just add a little bit more of a cushion to help sell the weight. Just a little bit, like a 3 more frame cushion. I really like to take that little direction. It's great. It's nice spacing too. You don't have to slow out. It just kind of pops up to that, which is nice.
Cada cosa que se dijo y se mostró en la sala de ese tribunal.
Okay. So the other thing with this character is his hands. His hands feel a little like they're in IK, and they're kind of locked in place at times, and then you have big movements with the body, but the hands don't feel like they're reacting to that movement, especially rotation-wise. So let's take a look and see where we can work that out. Okay, especially here. Let's look at this frame right here to about that frame. Okay, so everything feels like it rotated. It feels like his chest kind of moved over, his arm rotated, everything kind of rotated. But the hand right here is locked kind of in place, and it's not rotating. It's translating up and down, which also makes it feel a little more IK, because usually, you move in arcs, but his hand is just going straight up and down right there. So it feels like it needs to do a little bit of rotation because his upper body is rotating, and that'll help that feel a little less IK, and it'll feel more connected to what the body's doing.
Mostró en las...
Yeah, so let's, in this section, his hand should start rotating more so that we start seeing a little bit more of the fingers coming out here. See, so it just kind of rotates a little more like that. Not as much as what I've drawn, but just to illustrate the point. I exaggerated that a little bit.
Te mostró en la sala de ese...
Okay, and then this section here feels also a little bit like it's an IK. You've got nice movement with the arms and the hands here, and they're kind of leading the action. But then they hit this point right here, and they totally lock in place, and then the body moves. So that feels a little disconnected.
Mostró en la sala de ese tribunal.
See that? So we're just trying to make that feel a little less disconnected by getting the body to also have a little bit of that movement while the hands are moving. And also keeping these hands here from freezing. Just give them a little bit more of a slow in there. And then if you watch this finger here, it also kind of pops forward and then locks in place there. So you just want to add some little cushions in there just so things don't feel like they're sticking and popping.
De tribunal todas
Cool. Okay. Actually, let's go through the rest of him.
demuestran que es culpable.
That's great. I really like that push off,
Demuestran
the little shake with his head, and you broke up the jaw. That was really cool.
Demuestran que es culpable. Que se que...
Then when he comes to a
Muestran que es
stop
culpable.
there, it feels a little too stiff again. I would probably try to just add a little bit more of a slow in with the rotation on the head, so that it just settles a little bit better. It's nice that everything isn't stopping at the same time, but you're keeping the jaw moving, but it just feels like the head kind of froze there a little bit.
Que es culpable. Que se cree que soy idiota.
And then the same thing kind of happens
Que soy idiota.
there. This is such a big movement going from his head here to there. There's a little bit of a spacing problem as well, where if you track his nose, you have a nice little slow out there, which is cool. And you have a big spacing jump there. In the next frame, it's small spacing, but then it pops. See that? So you want to have like a nice kind of ramp up in spacing and slow in, slow out. So it's slowing out, then it picks up steam, it's moving fast, then you have a nice slow in with a real tight cushion. But what's happening is you've got kind of spacing where it's nice, it's slowing out, it has a big jump in spacing, then there's another little smaller movement, then a big jump, and then it kind of freezes here, so it just kind of flat lines. So you're just going to want to add a little bit more of a cushion in there and then work out that one little spacing problem right there between these two frames. And overall, I think you could probably add another blink with this character, at least one, maybe two, just to make him feel a little more alive and a little more connected, especially here, because he's kind of looking at this character. I think I would actually do some little darts too with him. It feels like his eyes are just a bit locked throughout the whole shot. So there's a couple areas where I think you could just do little movements and darts with the eyes. So he's looking at his face, and then maybe he's watching what his hands are doing. And then when he changes direction and focus from looking at him, which I think his eyes should be a little bit higher here, then you could have him blink and then look at the papers that he throws. Because right now there's no change of eye direction, really. It's just kind of a head movement. And usually we blink when we change focus. It's not every eye movement needs a blink, but if you're really focused on something and then you want to focus on something else, a lot of times you blink, just kind of reset your eye. So I think that would be a good area to do that. I think that's all I got for him. I think he's looking really cool.
Cada cosa que se dijo y...
Yeah, like in this section, I think you could do some eye darts and maybe a blink in there just to keep him a little alive. I also like that you're doing a good job of drawing the audience's eye back and forth. You're not doing too much with him, so that you don't want to, because we want to look at the other character at this point. But right now he feels just a little too frozen. So just some little eye darts and some blinks, I think, will liven him up without being super distracting, so that we can focus on him really.
Cosa que se dijo y se mostró en la sala de ese tribunal todo.
The only other thing I would say is this section here. I love this idea. He's pulling on him, and it's real cartoony, and it's real snappy, and the accent hits where it should. The only thing is, this character's huge, and it feels a little touch weightless, a little bit light. And I think you could pretty much just add one more frame in there, and it'll just give you a little more weight. So basically, what's happening is you're doing nicely with the drag here, but I think you could probably drag it even more, so that you'll have another frame where the head is still closer to where it was, and this character's even slowing out a bit too. Maybe he's still about there, with his hands on his chin. And then you take off. So it's just going to slow it down a little bit, and it's just going to give it a little more weight.
Todas.
That's all it needs. I think that it looks really cool though.
Todas de.
And the other thing is, same thing with the shoulder with this character. I like the little overlap. I think it's cool, but it feels a little too isolated to just this shoulder. See this line right here? This line doesn't seem to change too much. So I like the timing of everything. I like that you've got this great movement here. I would just try to get a little more change of shape in this section, so it just kind of drops that whole shape down a little bit more. And maybe even get a little bit of movement with that shoulder as well. Just so it doesn't freeze there. And I think you could probably loosen up the fingers a little bit here as well. They feel a little stiff coming across. Yeah, especially because it was such a big movement, and your fingers are great to do a little overlapping with, So right now they feel like they made a huge movement, and the fingers just kind of locked there. So it would be good just to get like a little bit of, just to overshoot with the fingers and then settle back, just on that one section right here. So like in here, the fingers could be dragging a bit more. And then when they get to their extreme here, they could open up a bit. And then when they come back, they could settle. And they'll be a little bit offset from when the hand is doing that. Yeah, because it looks like his two top fingers aren't on the table. Like the pinkies and stuff you could leave there, because it feels like they're connected, but the other fingers feel like they should overlap. Okay, let's take a look at the other character. Okay, it's pretty funny. I like that kind of movement. Couple of things. First, let's talk about this eye dart. I think the eye dart's a little too fast, and it feels a little disconnected from the brows a bit. I think when the brow is coming down here on this frame, I think that's when you should start doing the eye dart. So the eyes would just slightly be slowing out there, and then they'll hit that spot. And usually what you do with eye darts is, usually the eyes lead kind of head movements, but also what you want to do is you want to have little cushions. Usually something I like to do is I like to leave my eyes in stepped, so that I get this kind of quick, kind of ballistic movement with the eyes, just like you have in stepped. But then I'll go back in and I'll add little cushions. I usually don't like to clamp or spline the eyes because you get real kind of mechanical motion, which you don't have. I think your stuff is almost the other extreme where things are just a little too clicky, and you just want to add little tiny cushions. So typically what you'll have with an eye dart is, let's say you have you have an eye that's looking here, and then on the next key, you want the eye looking over here. Okay, so usually what you'll do is, let's call this frame 1, and we'll call this frame 4. Frame 2 will be like a slight little cushion. So it's just starting to move. Then what you're going to have is it's going to pop over to frame 3, which is a tight favor to frame 4, and then frame 4 it just moves a little bit. See, so you don't have any kind of middle in between. It just kind of has a little slow out, big jump, and then a little slow in. And I think that works really well for a lot of eye darts. The only time you might want to add that middle frame is if you have kind of something like this example, where you've got the eye going from one extreme of the eye to the other. A lot of times it's such a big movement, you might need a breakdown where the eye kind of is in the middle of the eye, and then you have these little tight favors coming out and in. So it'll be like a 5-frame transition. But with any kind of little eye darts, it's good to just do this kind of a timing. And then if you want them even faster, you could take out one of these slow outs or slow ins. So the eye could just go from frame 1, pop to frame 3, and then cushion on frame 4, or it could do the opposite, and it could go slow out on frame 2 and then just pop to frame 4 with no cushion. One thing you don't want to do is overshoot with the eyes. You just want little tiny cushions. Okay, so I think in there, especially you want the brows and the eyes to feel a little more connected. Like what happens in your shot here is the brows kind of come down and then the eyes move. So you just want to have it overlap. So while the brows are coming down, the eyes are starting to slow out, and then you get a little more connection there.
Got it.
And I think the brows also feel like they're sticking a bit. They need a little bit more cushion. They just kind of pop into that shape and they don't sink into it. So try adding a little bit more cushion in there. Okay, so that's just taking what you have and showing you how to make that better. One thing that might be a little bit of a change, but it might be better, is to have him just constantly staring at him as he's coming up. I think that might be a little bit funnier, especially because he's the way you have him sneaking up on him. It's like he's like staring at him, But the way you have it right now is he's not really looking at anything here. He's just kind of looking straight up, and then it's not clear what he's actually looking at there before he blinks and looks at him. So I would try doing a version where he's just constantly coming around his shoulder and looking at him, and it might be a little bit funnier.
Cada cosa que se dijo y se mostró en la...
Good. You're doing some great stuff with him. I really like this walk. I like the big step out right there, the big stride.
Cosa que se...
Very funny. Cool. I think, that's good. You have a little bit of upward movement there. I might even push that just a little bit more. Not as much as I'm drawing, just a little bit more before it comes down. Just kind of move that out a little bit.
Cada cosa que se dijo.
I think he looks really good. He's a much smaller character, lighter character, so you can get away with a lot more quick transitions than you can with a bigger character. And I think it works well with him.
Cada cosa.
Dialogue, all this stuff with the expressions is excellent.
Cada cosa.
Yeah, the whole cada cosa.
Cosa.
The little pop you're doing with the eyes is great.
Cosa.
The dialogue's perfect in that section.
Cada cosa que se dijo y se mostró en la sala de ese tribunal, todas...
Great. Okay, it's just a couple of things with him. There's some areas in here where it feels like his arms are just popping around a little too much. And it's basically this section right here. So the arm comes up and then down, all kind of on ones. So on this frame, it's down, then it goes up, then it goes right back down. All on one. So it just feels like it kind of pops a little bit. I would just try to keep the spacing a little bit smaller. So you could do that kind of up and down movement, but just don't have it as broad so that it doesn't feel like a pop. It just feels like a nice little quicker movement.
En la sala de ese tribunal, todas...
talked about just dragging him just a little bit more in here before he comes over. I think even in here, you're doing a nice little overshoot with the head, but I would just do a little bit more with his upper chest rotation. He just feels a little bit stiff right there.
Todas.
Yeah, you've got this great drag here. So you just want to overlap that section of it, because this shape just kind of hits a wall right there.
Todas.
You can even try doing a little bit more of an overshoot with his Y on his root. You see he comes up. Yeah, like, if we watch his root, then he kind of comes up, and then he should come back down. Yeah, you just kind of freeze it.
Todas.
Yeah, the movement coming forward here with his body and his hips feels a little mechanical. It just kind of translates forward and then sticks. So I think if you get like a nice arc in there where it goes down and then up, it'll feel a lot nicer. And then the upper body is going to react to that, so you'll get a little more drag there. And it's going to settle very quickly just because you know, he is a light character in the cartoony style you're going for. But you just want to get a little bit more of an arc in there.
Todas demuestran que es culpable. ¿Qué se cree?
Okay, the other thing that stood out with him was just this head scaling in here. He feels like his head kind of skews. It's kind of losing volume. It's nice that you're trying to get some nice squash and stretch in there, but here it's kind of drawing your eye away from his face and his dialogue because his whole head is just kind of doing kind of an odd compression. So I would just take all that scaling out in there, especially going from like his head shape here, which is pretty big, and then it just kind of all skews down and just kind of pops around a little bit.
¿Qué se cree? Que soy idiota. Cada cosa que se dijo y se mostró en la sala de ese tribunal, todas demuestran que es culpable.
Okay, I think the only other section
Demuestran que es culpable. ¿Qué se cree? Que soy
that stood out, there's a couple of things with the arms in here. This hand is great. I love that kind of gesture. And the spacing is nice. You're kind of holding up at the top. And then it slows out, which is cool. And then speeds up. But then it slows in at the bottom, so you have kind of a spacing problem there. And also this frame might be too close to the previous frame. Again, you want like nice spacing where here it kind of picks up speed, and then at the top of the arc, you know, kind of slows down, and then it gradually picks up steam until it kind of leaves the frame here. You know, because then it just pops behind his body here. But it kind of slowed in for a couple of frames there before it disappeared behind his body. So you've got that weird kind of spacing thing where it's picking up steam, it's got good acceleration, then it slows down, and then it pops again. So you just want to work out the spacing on this hand coming out. Okay, and then the last part is just this paper throw. A couple of things with this. One, I like all this movement. This looks great. You know, just the way you're leading with the elbow, which is cool. Most people forget to do that. And you're doing some nice stuff with the body as well. The only problem is then what happens here is the body locks, and then the arm is still doing quite a bit of movement, but it doesn't feel like it's being affected. It's affecting anything else, especially with the shoulder and the upper chest rotation. You know, like when you do like a throw like that, it feels like everything should kind of move because it's a real big kind of grand gesture, you know. But it feels like you start at moving everything, and then once the arm comes out, then everything locks and just the arm is moving. And see, like when I just move my arm like that, like how much my shoulder and my upper chest are affected by that. So that's what you kind of need in there. See, it's more in this section here. So you have like all this movement with the arm, and even in there, but it doesn't feel like anything's being affected. Here it feels like the shoulder needs to be affected more, and the upper body should probably have a little bit more rotation. So what you could probably do is take his whole body and rotate it a little more like that on this pose. And then as the arm comes in, and his whole body rotates more this way, so you get into this pose a little bit, and then you have a nice little cushion. And then the last part is just the paper. If you look at it here, so let's track the shape. At the speed it's going and the direction it's going, the next frame, the paper will probably have to be about there. See that? But what you have is the paper goes in this direction, and then it changes direction on this next frame. So if you just change this frame and put the paper a little closer here, then it'll feel like it's moving at the right angle and it's not changing direction. You might want to speed it up just a little bit. It just feels a little like it kind of sticks in there for a little too long. Yeah, just a little bit. It just feels like the first initial throw should be pretty fast, and then the air resistance would slow it down pretty quickly, and then it would kind of settle to the ground or to the table.
Cada cosa que se dijo y se mostró en la sala de ese tribunal, todas demuestran que es culpable. ¿Qué se cree? Que soy idiota.
Excellent, really cool. And then the last thing would just be the dialogue. I think you're really doing an amazing job with finding those beats and the accents and the jaw movement. All the lip sync looks great. There's just one area where it feels like it's kind of missing.
Cada cosa que se dijo y se mostró en la sala.
Right in here. It's from about this section here to about this section where it feels like the dialogue is you're hitting the big shapes, but then there's a lot of little kind of things that are happening, a lot of little syllables that you're kind of glazing over in there, so it doesn't feel like it's hitting those. And like he's speaking really quickly, so it feels like the jaw should be doing a lot more in just that section than what it is doing. So I'll go through it and just scrub through the audio and just make sure you're really accenting everything in there. One good thing to do is, this happens all the time, you get so used to playing your entire shot and watching it back, especially when it's not like a really long shot, that when the dialogue misses in spots, it's like there's spots where your dialogue's working and then spots where it misses, but when you watch it from beginning to end, you just kind of glaze over those spots that weren't working. So a good trick is to just play the word where it starts that you think might be missing. So this looks like when he's saying mostro en la sala. It's more the sala, like that L and then the little jaw movement that you need in there to sell that. It feels like that's missing. So just play it from that section. And then just back up. And just keep playing it. And scrub through it in Maya and just see what's happening, because you'll see that that's kind of missing a little bit in there. Other than that, I think it feels great. Yeah, Todos looks cool. You could probably, it feels like this shape is sticking a little bit. Todos, yeah, like these two shapes feel pretty similar. I think you could probably open up this one wider and then settle into that. It just feels a little too poppy sticky. Yeah, especially in that section. You could probably even drag the head, I think, a bit more here. I think it just feels a little sticky right there. And then the last part, it feels a little off. Idiota. Idiota. So it's on the T, idiota. So you have to have the tongue kind of reach the top of the mouth, with the roof of the mouth for the ta, and then the jaw's going to open up. It's going to kind of pop open and then settle back. And it feels like just that area feels a little soft. Yeah, it doesn't feel like the ta, idiota, is hitting. And then the same thing with the eye dart at the very end with him. It just kind of goes from there and then pops. and you can just use a little bit of a cushion. Same thing with the brows and the lids, and try to keep them, you know, a little softer, and just try to get a little more texture with the face, especially with the brows, where they kind of are going to lead the lids a little bit. So they're going to move, and then the lids are going to happen maybe a frame after that. And you just want to keep them together and keep them more connected, and try to soften them at times so they don't just kind of stick into a position.
Iota.
You know, like iota. I think you could probably overshoot the brows like iota and then settle back down. Right now they just kind of hit that one pose and stick there.
¿Qué se cree? Que soy idiota.
I think that's all I got for you. You did a really great job. All the notes that I'm giving you are really kind of picky, polishing kind of notes, and I mean you did the test in a very quick amount of time. So great job. I think it's an amazing test, and if you just polish these little things, especially the shoulders on that big character, I think that's probably the biggest thing that you need to work on. I think you have a great test, and it's going to look amazing on a reel. So Anthony, excellent. Congratulations. You deserve that win, and I'll talk to you later.